Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. It is Monday. Dennis is here with me, and we are going to be talking about some dynasty quarterbacks and the rest of the latest news in the league. But before we jump in, Dennis, how was your weekend?
Man, my weekend was something. I'm no Bob Vila, that's for sure. Trying to patch a couple holes in my wall. Had to cut one hole bigger to patch the other hole behind it. Took a jigsaw to the index finger, ended up with 7 stitches and a hairline fracture at the bone at the end of my right index finger. You haven't lived until you've gotten a numbing shot directly into an open wound, let me tell you.
Something to look forward to, I guess, for the people that are going to be out there getting an open wound.
I highly recommend not doing it, but...
Well, speaking of a numbing shot into an open wound, the Chiefs named their offensive coordinator, and guess what? It's Matt Nagy.
I mean, did that surprise anybody?
I mean, mildly, would you say his Chicago teams had much in the way of offense?
But the offense in Kansas City is Andy Reid. He calls the plays. He works with the coordinator to do install. It seems almost like the offensive coordinator in Kansas City is a research assistant. It's kind of what it looks like. You know, it was so hard for Eric Bieniemy to get what felt like a legitimate shot at a head coaching gig. And, you know, they always found excuses to not let him, to the point where he had to go somewhere else. He had to take a lateral move with the hopes that he can do well in Washington and end up getting a head coaching job. Now, others have came out from under the Reid tree without play calling experience, or they've gotten play calling experience somewhere else. I don't know. Nagy's Chicago offenses weren't great, you know. I mean, I guess the first year with Mitch Trubisky was okay, but it was kind of all downhill from there once he started getting his own players in there. I don't expect a whole lot to change in Kansas City. It's going to be Andy Reid directing the show with input from Nagy when, you know, he'll do his research, share it with Andy. It's going to be Travis Kelce. It's going to be Patrick Mahomes and whoever the new wide receivers are going to be.
Yeah, the more exciting thing, I think, for me was seeing Alex Smith is going back as the quarterback's coach.
Yeah, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I guess they just announced that today. I thought that would be kind of fun because he was obviously there during Mahomes' rookie year. So, nice spot.
Being Patrick Mahomes' quarterback coach kind of reminds me of Adam Gase being Peyton Manning's quarterback coach, Nathaniel Hackett being Aaron Rodgers' quarterback coach. I hope that it doesn't turn out that way. Maybe Smith has great intentions of becoming a head coach and stuff, but we've seen people come in and be the quarterback coach for these quarterbacks with a long history that basically do things their own way, and the quarterback coach gets a shot somewhere. And I don't know. It could be good. I like Alex Smith a lot better because I'm more familiar with him than I was with Adam Gase or maybe Nathaniel Hackett because he did play in the NFL at a high level. But playing at a high level doesn't always mean you're going to be a good coach.
So true. Second piece of news, the Bears have seemed to be reports they are leaning toward moving the top pick. Does this kind of end the talk for you that they're going to trade Justin Fields this offseason?
I never really took they're going to trade Justin Fields this offseason talk very seriously, but I also never say never. I mean, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, we'll give you 4X for the first pick, or we'll give you 5X for your current quarterback, some teams are going to say, well, I'm going to take the 5X because it's the better value deal. And we still have pick number 1, and we can go get who we think is the best quarterback in this draft, and we have all of this other capital or assets to go with that. I've always felt like it was going to be trade the pick, but they also, because they don't have a need at quarterback, there's going to be teams that, unless they aren't satisfied with the ability to take whichever quarterback is left, may not. If I'm sitting and I'm like, well, if I can go to 3 and I can get whoever's left over of Stroud or Young instead of going all the way up to 1, Chicago isn't going to take a quarterback. So why? So the trade market could end up getting kind of wonky. I think in the end, we see it all the time. There's going to be a team that says, no, I'm going to go get my guy. And so that means I've got to get to 1 where I have a choice. I can guarantee nobody else can leak me. We'll see. We're going to see teams leaking scenarios. Hey, it's, Chicago. And the team leaking scenarios is going to be Chicago. Oh, well, this team is offering X, but I know this other team wants this. Now it's like, oh, well, this team is offering Y. Stuff is going to come out. Whether it's true or not, silly season is getting ready to fire up. So I'm looking forward to see what kind of offers they get.
Yeah, I never thought they were really going to deal Fields either, and I think this is the best possible move for Chicago. Get as much back as you can, because let's face it, beyond the fact they have Fields, they have a lot of holes in a lot of other places on offense and defense. This could be a big offseason for Chicago. The other bit of news today, Carson Wentz released by the Commanders. Didn't really work out for him. He kind of flamed out in Philly, went to Indianapolis, got traded after flaming out there. Doesn't really work for the Commanders. What is next for Carson Wentz?
XFL, USFL. I don't know. I mean, we saw Geno Smith take a long trek as a backup quarterback and end up, in his 30s as a viable starter. It's got to be humbling for Wentz to get bounced around these last 3 or 4 years and basically really, really kind of stink the joint up. He's going to have to go do some significant work to rehab his image, go in somewhere. Maybe he's the next Charlie Whitehurst and he turns into Clipboard Jesus, and that's just what the rest of his career is going to be. It could be 2 years, it could be 10 years of backing somebody up. I don't know if he'll ever be able to rehab his image to the point where he's being brought in to compete for a starting job, though. He's 28 years old, 29 years old now. He's pushing 30. I think teams are looking at it and going, he's really not performed in his last 3 stops, and it's time to sort of pull back. He'll probably get a low deal to be a backup somewhere with a team that hopes they can give him enough opportunity to be able to get his head right and maybe find some of that magic from early in his career if they need to stick him in their starting lineup. There's a bottom third of the NFL that has quarterback issues. And while I don't think anybody's going to see Wentz as the answer, somebody might see him as an option.
Yeah, I didn't think he was as bad as all the blame he got in Indianapolis, where he got injured and they had some other problems, but it did not look good at all in Washington. And when they put him back in at the end of the season, he pretty well killed their playoff hopes. I think his best option is probably to be a backup somewhere. It's hard to believe somebody's going to go. If he went somewhere where he had a chance to compete to start, it's going to be on a team where they pick up another one of these veterans, or they take a young rookie and they might be looking for a like Mitch Trubisky to start 3 games before we throw him out there.
Well, maybe we end up seeing Darnold, Wentz, and Baker all on the same team, and that draft class fighting it out. Maybe they rotate.
They aren't the same draft class. Wentz was a year before.
Gotcha.
He's the same draft class as Goff. But boy, wouldn't that be murderer's row? I think the one you're looking for is Baker, Darnold, and Sam Rosen ending up in the, or Josh Rosen. Yeah. See, he's so good, I forgot what his first name is. All I know is Paxton Lynch has set some kind of ultimate record.
Now, it couldn't have been Josh Rosen, because wasn't Josh a number 1 pick, or did he go 2?
No, Baker was 1. Josh Rosen was number 10 to the Cardinals.
Gotcha.
Baker was 1. Darnold was 2. Josh Allen was 7. Lamar Jackson was 32, but Josh Rosen was 10, and he famously had that list of all the 9 teams that passed on him that he should probably send a congratulations note to.
Right.
Well, we're going to keep the quarterback train going, and Dennis and I are going to start looking at dynasty quarterbacks, because you know what? It's dynasty startup season, and it's also pretty close going to be free agent season. We're going to look at our dynasty ranks and positions. Today, we're going to do quarterbacks going 24 to 11. We'll hit the top 10 on Friday when Matt will be back with us, and I presume he will have his own top 10. But Dennis, I figured I'll let you kick it off. Why don't we do 3 at a time? So give me your 24, 23, and 22.
Well, I'm going to throw an extra one in, because my 24 is really a tie. I have Brock Purdy and Trey Lance at 24, because I'm not sure who it's going to be. I feel like, to me, they want to give Lance every opportunity because of his draft status, and Purdy just seems to be going in there and taking the job. So, but he's coming off an injury, and so I feel like they deserve to be back to back until we get some clarity in that situation. I have Geno Smith at 23 and Aaron Rodgers at 22. Now, because it is dynasty, I struggled with Rodgers because I do think he's going to play, and I think he's going to probably play at least 2 more years. And, you know, if you're thinking dynasty in a 3-year window, I know quarterbacks usually have a longer shelf than that, and I do think I did end up having him below. And Geno, I really struggled with. I wanted to put him higher, but I said it's just kind of a 1-year wonder bounce back. So he ended up down at 23 for me.
Yeah, and I'm going to say quarterback outside of like the top 7, which we'll be doing on Friday, I didn't feel incredible about anyone from like 8 to 30. You know, you could probably talk me into some things. We'll see how that goes. But my 24 was the same as yours, Brock Purdy. He looked really good. It's a real small sample size. The fact he hasn't gotten swelling down enough to have surgery is sort of concerning. The fact that Trey Lance is there is concerning. The fact he was literally the last pick in the draft, hard to feel rock solid about that, but that's kind of where quarterback is for me right now. I have Aaron Rodgers at 23, and it's a lot of what you talked about. I do think he plays this year, but I'm not convinced he even plays 2 more years. It feels like the last 3 years, the big question has been whether he even wants to continue playing. Maybe he finds some spark, but to me, he's in that where Tom Brady's been the last couple of years. If you have him and you're a veteran contender, he's a guy you can plug in there and win some games. But to me, if you're rebuilding it all, you need to move Aaron Rodgers because it's like a 1-year investment. You can probably get something back from him. I don't feel great about long term. Number 22 for me is Matthew Stafford. I love Stafford, but the injuries are starting to get worrying. He's another one where you started to hear rumors about will he keep going. It seems like all of that kind of core of the Rams Super Bowl winning team, from the coach to Aaron Donald to Matthew Stafford, are excited that they won a Super Bowl and are pretty content if they end up having to walk away. Stafford says he's going to come back to play. He struggled with injuries the last couple of years. It finally took him out last year. I just don't know how much longer I have. If you told me he was coming back in and he was healthy and he had a healthy offense around him, I still think he's a good producer, but I don't feel as good about the long-term value there. I'll do my next three and then we'll alternate back to you. For me, 21, Kenny Pickett. I liked the rookie season, but I'm not 100% sold on Pickett yet. I need to see more. Number 20 for me, Mac Jones. I'm encouraged that they actually went and got an offensive coordinator in Bill O'Brien. I hope he helps Mac Jones take a step forward because Mac Jones arguably looked like the best of the rookie quarterbacks in his rookie year, but kind of settled back last year. I really don't think he ever rises above being kind of a middling QB2. And then number 19 for me is Derek Carr. I like Carr's potential and his ceiling, but there are still a lot of unknowns for me, including where is he going to end up? How long is he going to end up there? So, Dennis, what are your next three?
So coming in at 21 for me is Matthew Stafford. I share the same concerns. He's actually, I thought he was about 34. He's actually 35. He's had some back issues, so that's a little bit concerning. He's down here by Rodgers. Really high performer, but getting older, having some injury issues. They've got some, Kupp's coming back off of an injury. They're probably going to cut A-Rob, Allen Robinson. Wouldn't surprise me a bit. They've got a pretty good tight end. They need some help on their offensive line. Their running game is okay. They've got a guy in Cam Akers that has some potential now that he's back off his Achilles. We'll see if he can kind of keep moving that forward, or they bring in another veteran. At 20, I have Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo, to me, he's a guy that he flashes some moments, but he also makes some bonehead plays, like about one a game. He doesn't seem to be able to stay healthy in, consecutive seasons. He's a free agent. He's probably going to go somewhere where he's gifted a starting job, but I don't know how good the team is going to be. There's some okay opportunities out there. Carolina with DJ Moore and Frank Reich taking over. Tampa with a couple good wide receivers and Evans and Godwin, but some questions on the offensive line. That doesn't seem to set up well for Garoppolo. New Orleans, they seem to always be trying to compete and working salary cap magic, but they've got some issues. So I'm not sure where he actually ends up landing, but it feels like he'll be gifted a starting job. But I just don't know that he's got much of a ceiling. And then Mac Jones, let's see, 24, 23, Stafford, Garoppolo.
Yeah, 19.
Then I have Mac Jones at 19. To me, this is kind of a make or break year for Jones. I feel like he could potentially have a ceiling somewhere in that 12 to 16 range, more so than the 18 to 20 range. It just is going to depend on how things develop. Competitive. He showed last year that he was competitive. He was, for lack of a better term, he was given hell to his coaches because he didn't feel like they were really putting the team in great positions. They're going to need to figure out what their wide receiver core is going to be. Jacoby Myers is a free agent. They can't draft a wide receiver to save their life. they need to, there's not any for them to sign. It's almost like we've got a couple good wide receivers coming into the NFL this year. And it's almost like if New England drafts one, you're just like, oh, I'm going to move them down at least a half a round, maybe a full round.
The full N'Keal Harry treatment.
My rookie draft, they're going to drop like a rock. But, Bill O'Brien is back as the offensive coordinator, and I think he's well suited to a coordinator role. And so it'll be interesting to see what kind of position he can put Mac Jones in to make plays. I like Jones's spirit and I like his fire, and I do think he's got a high-end QB2 ceiling if he can continue to develop.
Yeah, and you know what I find interesting? I think I'll be curious when Matt comes in. You and I have the same 10 players in our top 10 in a little different order. We have pretty much the same players in this range too, just in a slightly different order, which kind of tells you either we're both in lockstep or we're both way off base somewhere.
Right.
Why don't you do your next three?
All right. So I've got Derek Carr at 18. I kind of agree with what you said. It'll be interesting to see where he lands. He's got the jump start on free agency with the Raiders cutting him. I think he's still got some good games in him, some good years in him. I get a little bit nervous about the Jets because they have kind of underperformed offensively, and it's convenient for us to find excuses. It's the offensive line this year. It's the offensive coordinator this year or whatnot. But, they've got some decent running backs. Garrett Wilson is really good. It wouldn't surprise me if Corey Davis gets cut. They've got some serviceable journeyman tight ends. Elijah Moore looked like he could be something as a rookie, struggled last year in the offense and butted heads with the offensive coordinator, wide receiver coach. I think we'll see him take a step. So they do have some potential. Kenny Pickett at 17. I'm a little higher on Pickett because he's going into his second year. I think he's locked into the job for the next 2 or 3 years. He's got some good weapons: Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, and Najee Harris. I think they invest in the offensive line, whether it's through free agency, whether it's through the draft. That's really the biggest weakness I see for Pittsburgh on offense is improving that offensive line. Pickett's an okay quarterback as far as mobility goes, seems to throw the ball well enough. It'll be nice to see him kind of take that next step in his development. But I could see him and Mac Jones kind of being in the same range together for the next 6 or 7 years as young quarterbacks that aren't elite passers and aren't mobile. So they don't they may have 1 or 2 top 12 seasons, but for the most part, they're that high-end QB2. And then it's 16, Russell Wilson. I think Russ is going to bounce back this year, and I think he's still got a few good seasons left in him. I like Judy. I like Sutton. I like Dulcich. If they can pull the offensive line together for Russ, and Peyton is very experienced with short veteran quarterbacks, so it seems to make sense.
Before I get to mine, thank you very much, Peter. I can't take credit for this. This is the new shirt my wife picked out for me this weekend, so doing my best.
Are you drunk again, Pete?
Before I'm going to do my next three, but I'm just going to start off by saying you and I have Russell Wilson in the exact same position at 16. One of a couple where we are exactly in lockstep. And for me, this is a year where Russ could go either direction, and you could convince me of either that he could bounce back into something of top 12 territory. I would believe that, or that it's a disaster and they're going to be looking to do something else at quarterback by the end of the season. You could convince me of that too. I have a lot of questions about Denver. It's hard to know what their thoughts are with Javonte Williams, if they're going to go get more running backs. They keep having rumors that they're looking to deal either Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton, which personally makes no sense to me, but I guess we're just going to have to ride it out. And, Russell Wilson, we've seen consistent reports the last couple of years about some of his off the field stuff and his approach seemingly turning teammates off, and yet we get teammates from his time at the Seahawks and his time at Denver defending him. I just want it to stop. I don't know where it's going. And for me, he was like almost impossible to rank, not only because of all that, but because of my personal affinity for the Broncos. So I felt better to see that we both had him at the exact same spot. I'll go back. For me, 18, I had Jimmy G. I have, when he's there, he seems totally capable. Some of this might be landing spot. You referenced the Jets for Carr. I actually think Carr ends up with the Jets. I think Jimmy G ends up in Tampa Bay, and I like the pieces that they potentially have around him. My biggest questions with Jimmy is always, how many games are we going to see? Because when he plays a full season, we've seen him be successful. He's not flashy or spectacular, but he's a solid quarterback too. And I also personally like the value where you can get him right now. Nobody's really talking about him. He's kind of cheap. I actually found him on the waiver wire in one of my Superflex leagues, which shocked the heck out of me. I scooped him up because, I think you're right. He's going to end up somewhere being a starter. Hopefully he can play a lot of games. And then number 17 for me was also a hard one to rank. It's Tua Tagovailoa. I like the talent, and we saw with this supporting cast, he was great when he was on the field. Those concussions really scare me. I don't think it was just conjecture that he considered whether or not he needed to end his football career. And honestly, despite all the pep talks that they're trying to give to people out there, I'm not entirely convinced that we aren't one hit away from him being done. And from a dynasty perspective, that scares me a little bit. With I like the talent. I don't know. I'll go ahead and do my next three. At 15 for me, I have Geno Smith. Maybe I'm too high. I'm a lot higher than you. I think he ends up signing a 2 to 3 year deal. And in that 2 to 3 year window, I think he ends up being a solid QB2 for the Seahawks. I think he fits what they're trying to do. I think it works out well there. They have a good running back in Ken Walker. They have some good pieces.
QB2.
Yeah, I mean, he was a top 10 producer in fantasy this year. I don't know if that's repeatable, but I think he could be upper half solid. To me, that's 22 is more low end. 23 more low end QB2. Next one, another tough one to rank for me. Number 14, I have Kyler Murray. I don't know how much we see him this season. The coach and GM that drafted him are gone. We don't know what the scheme exactly is going to be and the fit with what they're doing in Arizona. He's a player who has always had a lot of potential, but we've talked about a few times, has yet to produce a 4,000-yard passing season, which, is not the be-all, end-all, but is kind of an interesting metric. I don't know how great I feel about him playing long-term with the kind of beatings that he's taken, especially if he's not going to run. So I have a lot of questions around Kyler Murray right now, which is why I'm probably a little lower on him than some other people. And then my last one, number 13, Jared Goff. I think he's in a good situation. And he looked good doing what they asked him to do. I think Detroit's in a position where they can put some more great pieces around on defense and maybe a couple other pieces on offense. I'm excited to see a full season of Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. Not as excited as I know you are, but I'm excited about that. I hope they can bring back Jamal Williams or find another good complimentary battering ram back. I liked what they were doing in there, and I liked Jared Goff's fit, and I think he's actually been a sneaky valuable QB2 starter. I have him in a couple places where he's either my QB2 or my QB3 in Dynasty, and I feel pretty great about that right now, which is not something I can always say about other people that are below him on this list. But I'll turn it over to you for your next group.
So I have Tua at 15. I'm just slightly higher on him. I do recognize that it is all about the health and the concussions with Tua. And if he stays healthy, if he gets it right, concussions are weird. He may never have another concussion as long as he plays, and his next hit might be the end of his NFL career. And we just don't know. And you have to be okay with that uncertainty. If I roster Tua, I'm trying to make sure I have 3 quarterbacks, just because I know that the risk is there. I don't know what the levels are going to be, but I want to have 3 quarterbacks that I know that if I lost him, I could start somebody in his place and still go with 2 quarterbacks. Then I have Jared Goff. I agree with you. I'm 1 spot lower on Goff than you. His home road splits are a little bit concerning. He had that kind of he did not scoring as many fantasy points on the road, so he kind of settles in as an ideal quarterback in a 3 quarterback build. So if you start to see, okay, that he's trending again where he's not playing well on the road against these types of defenses, if you've got another quarterback you can sub in, because when he's on, that offense is clicking with Brown and Swift. And, my concern with Jamal Williams is he's kind of had an every other year thing going. And, he had a great year last year, and I don't know if he'll be able to repeat that kind of touchdown volume he had. But I like what Williams brought to the table for Detroit. And I don't know that DeAndre Swift is ever going to be what we all thought he could be, whether it's because they don't believe he can handle the load or whether it's actually that he can't handle the load. One thing or another. Jameson Williams looked great, caught some deep passes. He's going to have to get out there. I do think they need to get a third receiver that's an upgrade over Josh Reynolds. Reynolds ideally is kind of a wide receiver for your team, but if you have Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then you can bring somebody in that you can count on to be that I think what they need is they need a bulky wide receiver to kind of fill that role. The 6'3", 225-pound guy to come in and be the wide receiver 3 for them. I don't know if they get that, but I like what Goff is bringing to the table. And then at 13, I have Kirk Cousins. I debated. There's part of me that wanted to move Kirk higher. That Sean McVay tree offense that he's in now seems like he's got the best wide receiver in the game. KJ Osborne and Adam Thielen are a really good wide receiver 2/wide receiver 3. TJ Hawkinson's, it seems to be just an absolute beast in Minnesota. So as long as they can keep their offensive line intact and maybe upgrade a little bit, the downside is their defense was so bad. Now that may be helpful for fantasy because then Kirk has to throw. They've got to score points to keep up. But it feels like bringing in Brian Flores, they're going to really work to upgrade that defense. And if you're going from 27 points a game you need to win to 20 points a game that you need to win, that's not great for fantasy. So I like Kirk. Got him situated at QB 13.
Yeah, that feels like the right spot, somewhere between QB2. He has like some QB1 upside. I'll let you finish your last 2, and then I'll give my last 2. So who's your 12 and who's your 11?
So I have Daniel Jones at 12 and Kyler Murray at 11. I think if Jones can stay in New York, there's definitely some concerns about the free agent quarterbacks and where they might go. Because we're looking at Carr, Garoppolo, Geno Smith, Daniel Jones, and then Lamar, who's probably in our top 10. Daniel Jones looked really good. He played the best he has in his career last season. I feel a lot better about him if he goes back to New York. New York adds another wide receiver to go with Isaiah Hodgins and Wan'Dale Robinson, Daniel Bellinger. It seems like it feels like they're going to find a way to get Barkley and Jones back. I don't know, but it's just how it feels. I I like his mobility. He really cut down on his turnovers. He's an athletic quarterback, and he's got a good arm. So as long as he limits the mistakes, he has a ton of potential. At 11, I got Kyler Murray, and so I am not a Kyler Murray fan, but I also recognize what he brings to the table with his mobility, and he does score well for fantasy. I just, with the new offense coming off the injury, I don't think I think he misses significant time this year coming back from the injury. And then when he does come back, I think there may be some limitations on him from the mobility standpoint. And we've seen him struggle with that. But whether he's still in Arizona or whether he goes somewhere else, I think he's going to be productive for the next few seasons with the type of game that he plays. I don't know, I haven't looked far enough ahead to see if he goes via free agency somewhere else or he gets cut, where he might be the best fit, because he's only ever been in Arizona with Cliff. It'll be interesting to kind of see when we get to that crossroad what happens. Obviously, I feel like there's some rookies that are going to slot in ahead of him, which would push him out of the top 12 for me. But as of right now, not including rookies, I have him at QB 11.
Yeah, and we'll get to that question because I'll have a couple questions for you before we get out of here. But my last two, I have Kirk Cousins at 12. I wrestle with it a little bit. Some of the same things that you've talked about. I really feel like he's more of a top end QB2, but it just the way the dominoes fell, I have more questions about some of the other players. I basically know what I'm getting in Cousins, and I know what's around him. And I think Minnesota did well record-wise last year, and they're making a concerted effort this offseason to try to compete. And I think that's probably a promising sign NFL-wise. I don't know if that hurts him a little bit fantasy, but I think he's a pretty steady producer and has been for the last few years with Minnesota. Number 11 for me is Daniel Jones. I, like you, think he's going back to New York. I like the fit with Brian Daboll. I like that they kind of unleashed him as a rusher. And as a passer, it would be hard to imagine they have worse passing options in terms of receivers than what they had this year. I think they're going to make a concerted effort there. I like that they brought back Isaiah Hodgins. I really thought they found something there. I like the potential of a young Daniel Bellinger. I am also with you. I think there's a better than 50% chance that Saquon's back. I think that they have the core of something that can be built around in New York. If they can keep those pieces and add a couple of things, I think there's some good potential. But I think it also speaks to the way I feel about our quarterback landscape right now. Like I said, after about the top 7, I start to have questions, even when we're up into the top 10 that we're going to look at on Friday. So I guess my first question for you before we get out of here, you referenced it a little bit. It sounds like you're leaning toward at least one, maybe 2 rookies slotting in to the top 12 for you. But how do you feel about the rookies that are coming in? We're looking at veterans now. Pretty soon we'll look at rookie rankings and then we'll kind of combine them. But how do you feel about some of the rookie quarterbacks coming up?
Yeah, I feel very good about CJ Stroud. I feel real good about Bryce Young. I'm warming up more to Anthony Richardson. I've been in the Dynasty Nerds film room and I've watched some of his film. Richardson needs to get more accurate. His comp is somewhere in the Cam Newton, Josh Allen entering the league sort of a realm. He's going to have to be more accurate than Cam was. And I don't know that he can get that. He's got a really good arm. And despite the perception of him by some analysts that that's all he has is the strong arm, he makes some nice touch throws. So I'm not worried about him being able to kind of finesse some throws, but it all comes down to can he throw with power and finesse with better accuracy? he's a great athlete. He's probably the best athlete of the guys entering this quarterback class. So, Richardson is just outside that top 12 for me, top 10 for me. Stroud, I think Stroud has a good arm. He's got good touch, good velocity, throws the ball well. He's very mobile in the pocket, doesn't look to run, can run a little bit. Bryce Young, really good arm, really accurate, really good in the pocket, good in the mental game, but he's small. I think he's going to measure height-wise in the Russell Wilson range. But to me, I don't think he's going to be very heavy. And that's really, he's listed at 6'1", 194. And if he comes in at, 5'10" and a half, 185, that's a red flag for me. I get that you're very mobile, you're accurate, you have a very high football IQ. He would probably still be my QB2, even if that's where he checks in. Will Levis, I think, is a project to an extent. He's got some real good traits, but he makes some really questionable throws and decisions. Mayonnaise in the coffee notwithstanding.
Mayonnaise on anything's disgusting to me. So
I like Hendon Hooker a lot, mostly because I think he's going to be a value. I know he's old; he's 25, and that's really a mark against him. When you come into the league at 25, you need to be ready to play. You need to be able to step in and run the offense. I feel like Hooker might be able to do that. I don't know what his ceiling is. Before his injury, he was a very mobile guy, could run really well and pass the ball, but is really super productive. And so, when you're 5 years into your college career, there's a question about how much older and wiser. So that really has to play out. Once we get past those top 5 guys, there's some work to be done to find the next Bailey Zappi or Brock Purdy. I haven't really started that work too much, so that'll be something I get into a little further down the road.
I don't even think anyone found Brock Purdy until like week 16 of the regular season. Of the ones you mentioned, I feel like Stroud, Young, and probably Richardson will end up somewhere in my post-draft top 24. And I also feel like there's going to be free agency is going to have a big impact, especially on the grouping that we were talking about today, where that settles out for me somewhere in May and June. Before we get out of here, my last question. In this group that we looked at from 24 to 11, who is your biggest question mark?
Probably Geno Smith. I know he performed really well last year, but man, he rode the pine for a long time for a reason. And I'm really nervous that it was just kind of that, he's the Gary Barnidge of quarterbacks. And I want him to be, he's got the weapons with Kenneth Walker, Fant, and Disley, DK. He's got the weapons. They just added an offensive tackle last year. So it's all there for him. But there's a little tinge that's like, man, it's like looking at Jalen Hyatt, the wide receiver out of Tennessee that won the Biletnikoff, that, his first 2 years in college was around 300 yards receiving. And then last year he blows up, wins the Biletnikoff award. And it's like, fool me once. Okay, you're going to fool me again because, man, that was nice. But I get a little bit nervous. Tua and the concussions is a wild card. To me, it's you have to manage. If you roster Tua, you have to manage your team with the understanding that he could be gone, that it could just end. the Brock Purdy, Trey Lance offseason dance is going to be interesting because Purdy's not going to be healthy and Lance is. And, we know they traded up, spent a lot of draft capital on Lance. And while Shanahan isn't one necessarily to say, well, that's the draft capital is going to be the tiebreaker. It's all about production. And, it's really interesting to me to watch that and see sort of how does it shake out there in San Francisco.
Yeah, you touched on my biggest question mark is Tua, because I was a big advocate that I thought he had top 12 potential last year, and I consistently had him up in the top 12. I was excited about what Miami's doing. And when we saw him on the field with Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, and occasionally remembering Mike Gesicki was on that team, it worked. And he put up some great numbers, but I just have not been able to get past the concern for his health and the concern for him, as a person, not as an NFL player. And that's why I have him at a weird middling rank. So to me, he was probably the hardest because, my heart, based on his talent, wants to put him up in the top 12. And if I knew he was 100% healthy and I didn't have to worry about anything, he'd probably be inside my top 10. But that worry, especially like when you're playing the long game, if I was in redraft, maybe I'm rolling the dice on that. But if you're playing the long game and you're committed to an asset that if it doesn't work out, you just essentially have a hole to fill, which is what happens in Dynasty. As one who got bit by Michael Thomas on many, many, many teams, I know different kinds of injury, but sometimes when it goes and it leaves a giant void. And I think you bring up some sage advice. You'll laugh at this. Several places I have too. I did try to hedge my bets and pick up Bridgewater last year, which did not benefit me in the slightest.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see Miami upgrade their backup quarterback position. I know they like Skylar Thompson. Teddy seemed like a great move.
It was a genius move until they had to play him.
He just couldn't stay healthy either. So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So of the guys outside the top 24 on your list, who do you think has the best shot to move into the top 24, and how high do you think they could possibly get?
For me, it's Trey Lance. I've never been a big Lance believer, and I still am not. I have him currently at 29, but for all the reasons you talked about, plus his raw physical skills, if he got in there and was able to stay healthy and was able to maximize on that potential, he probably does have some top 10 potential.
I have a guy you didn't even see fit to even include on your post 24.
I haven't done all of my. I didn't drop. I just put the next 5.
Right. So I think Andy Dalton. He's to me he's not flashy. He's not great. He doesn't elevate a team. But if you put him on a decent team, he usually plays pretty well. He's a guy I could see going to Tampa to pair with Kyle Trask because they quote unquote believe in Kyle Trask.
Yeah.
It's believe in Kyle Trask's season.
It's believe in Sam Howell season as well.
But Dalton is a guy that he doesn't have a lot of years left, but he's somebody that'll come in at a cheap price that you can put in a competition. That if you put him in a competition with Trask, he's going to win it. If you put him in a competition with Howell, he's probably going to win that one too. Sorry, Peter. But I just it's curious. Is he going to make it to Q? Could he be a QB1 if he's got Godwin and Evans? Maybe, but no. I certainly think if Andy goes to Tampa, he could be a middle QB2 fairly comfortably with that receiving core.
If it makes you feel better, Peter, I have Sam Howell at 26, slightly ahead of Trey Lance. Well, It's been fun. On Friday, we will be looking at our top 10. Matt should be with us as well. The combine also kicks off, I believe it kicks off on Thursday, correct?
Yeah, I think they start arriving Tuesday or Wednesday, weigh-ins, physicals, things like that. Then the actual performances start on Thursday.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you for being a fan. Yeah, so we will actually have had a couple of positional groups. I think it's mostly defense from what I saw that's going first, but we'll talk about any things that wowed us on Thursday and Friday. But Dennis, if the people are at home tonight and they're just realizing that 911 hasn't stopped its winter hiatus and they're just feeling lonely out there with nothing to watch, what can they do to fill that time?
Well, they can go and they can download and subscribe to the Fantasy Football Roundtable. Give us a rating and a review. We love that stuff. Go to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel, and you can actually watch our sparkling faces talk about these quarterbacks. Also, if you're not doing anything tomorrow night and you're a Nerd Herd member, you can sign up for the Dynasty Nerds Nerd Herd with 15% off using code Roundtable. Peter and I, Peter who's hopping in our comments, 9 o'clock tomorrow, doing a trade talk show. Getting the Nerd Herd Discord. Post your trade, and we'll talk about trades for an hour starting tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We're doing it every week now. I haven't told my wife yet. I got to break that news to her.
It is Dynasty trade season. You got to hop on there, give Dennis and Peter a listen. Until then, we will see you guys on Friday, and hang in there.